Welcome to the second season of Our Story Conversations with Filipino Entrepreneurs and Leaders. I'm Julia, joined by my co-host Jonesy. This season, we take a deeper dive into the lives of our guests before they built their business, what their plans are for the future, and the challenges faced, highs and lows, and lessons learned along the way. Welcome, Roland. Woohoo!
Hi, yes.
Yay. So I just want to start with how we met. You and I first met when you were actually the manager and sort of point man for your brother, who's a chef, and he was actually the main chef for one of our PhilDev events in LA a couple years ago. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about sort of what you were doing back then? Were you doing that for a while, or were you just stepping in to help, or what were you doing sort of before Kumu?
Yeah, around that time. So my background was I was a performance marketing entrepreneur. Actually, helped start a startup that actually exited in Silicon Valley, and I was in the middle of a sabbatical, focusing on nonprofit work, humanitarian work, and then my brother, he still is a chef, and he worked on he was Victorian David Beckham's private chef, Joe Jonas, Nick Jonas of the Jonas Brothers, Demi Lovato, and those types of things. And I remember we got invited on stage in Orange County to do an interview with the publisher of Forbes magazine. It was a conference with Pastor Rick Warren, the author of The Purpose-Driven Life, with the publisher of Forbes magazine, Malcolm Gladwell, and Ariana Huffington with speakers. And I remember we were on stage and we were sharing about this whole concept of incorporating love into your business model. And after the talk, we were going off stage, and then this Filipino woman came up to us and said, "Hey, are you guys Filipino?" Because they saw the last name, and we're like, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, my name is Cora. I am I have a magazine called Asian Journal." I go, "Asian Journal?" And so we're like, "No way, that's amazing." And then she said, "Yeah, we would love to invite you to do something." And so from there, I think PhilDev, I believe she works with PhilDev too. And there was an opportunity for a fundraising event. And, my brother, because he's a chef, needed help from an organizing perspective, needed someone. And so, I was just kind of communicating on his behalf, those types of things. And it was super cool. I think when Cora reached out for the opportunity to do the PhilDev dinner, I thought it would be a really great opportunity for my brother to meet some people. And it was a great, really great experience.
Awesome. So it was serendipitous for us and for you, I hope.
Yeah, no, it was super. I mean, it was a life-changing experience. Just so you all know, I had put together this huge, what was it? What are those things called? Gosh, I'm so old now. Vision board. And I put this whole vision board, of what I wanted to do in life. Next, what is my next stage in life? And my heart and my mind and my spirit was calling me to do something in the Philippines. So I was doing health goals, whatever. And I had this thing that really inspired me. I had a Forbes magazine, and on the cover was Dado. I hadn't even met him yet. And on the cover was Dado. And I put him on there, and I was just looking at it. I was like, wow, that'd be cool if I could meet him someday, right? And so that was so funny and that was May 2017. And I remember that by the time we got around to actually doing, the fundraiser and having the opportunity to meet him and have the opportunity of having him as an advisor, had no idea that this vision board ended up becoming this mission where I would actually, start a startup in the Philippines. But yeah, it was definitely a life-changing experience. So thank you, Jonesy. I always talk about how PhilDev was that kind of life-changing thing because having an opportunity to win that silent auction and have Dado as an advisor was that critical first piece. Which ironically, the publisher of that magazine ended up becoming an investor. Her name's Liza Gokongwei. She's the owner of Summit Media, and she actually was our first investor.
Oh,
And
she
you're gonna
was?
love
I
it.
didn't
Yeah.
know
So
that.
How
yeah, it was crazy.
serendipitous.
Yeah, it was so crazy. And imagine it's a vision board, right? At the
Yeah.
time. And you're gonna love this too, because in addition to meeting PhilDev and him advising us on, the 5 key things to prepare for a startup, when we put together a deck, I said, "Yo, Dado, is it okay if we put you as an advisor on our deck?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And then so when I sent it over to Liza, Liza's like, "Oh, Dado's helping you guys out, blah blah." And then when Liza invested, another family, the family that owns ABS-CBN, says, "Oh, Liza's in, we want to invest." So then they invested. And then when they invested, our third family, the Ayala family, is like, "Oh, wait, ABS and Liza's in it? I want to invest too." So then all of a sudden we have it was crazy. I was like, wow, it was a domino effect. So I think for any entrepreneur who wants to fundraise, there's this whole concept of FOMO, or fear of missing out, that sometimes it just takes one thing to move. And then it all kind of started when, we moved here with the advice of Dado. So we're always eternally grateful. So when you reached out, I'm like, yeah, sure. Anything for PhilDev. So yeah.
So I just wanted to go back, we met you here in Los Angeles. I'm actually based out here in LA.
Oh,
Have you always been in LA? And I also kind of wanted to ask, in line with that, is how was it like growing up as Filipino American? Because I find it so interesting that you grew up here and you moved back to the Philippines.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, I'm actually, Filipino American. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. And, for me, my family, the thing that I only knew about mostly was just, adobo, pancit, sinigang, which is my favorite. And so mostly from a food perspective. So when I went to study, I went to UC Santa Barbara for my undergrad. And that's where I really started to express my, to explore the Filipino part of my identity. And so Santa Barbara is actually the headquarters of the study abroad program for the entire UC system. And all my classmates would go to Paris, Barcelona, Japan, Singapore, and no one really wanted to go to the Philippines. And one time it did pop up, and I said, what, I'm just going to go. And I actually was the only student at Santa Barbara. A lot of my classmates wanted to go, but they were too scared. I went and fell in love with the country. My life changed when I studied abroad during that summer program. And so even though I was the only Santa Barbara student, actually, no, there was 2 students, people from every UC campus were there. So as a collective, our lives changed during that summer program.
I didn't know that. So, where was your exchange program?
It was at UP Los Baños.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was really, really interesting, because in previous iterations, it was in Diliman, and the kids were partying too much. So in Los Baños, you're in the province, right. So you can't do anything. You just have to study. And so it was really smart. We were just isolated there and really studied. And I to this day, actually, unfortunately, the person who founded it, she passed away this year. I wrote an article talking about my experience with her on Esquire, and it really kind of goes into detail of how this kind of lost Filipino American student was trying to find his way in the world. And that program really gave me a deep sense of identity, of a certain level of responsibility and purpose, because in addition to Dado, it was the Philippine ambassador to the US at the time. His name's Jose Quisha. The Philippine ambassador was like, "Yo, Roland, okay, we love and appreciate the fact that you do the mga," because what I was doing was the clean water projects, anti-sex trafficking, HIV/AIDS work. I was doing poverty alleviation in Tondo, that type of work at the time when I met you guys. But similar to why I love PhilDev is Ambassador Quisha was like, "Roland, but your background is in technology, advertising, business development, stuff like that. Have you thought about actually opening a business in the Philippines so that the technology jobs that you create in the Philippines might arguably have a bigger impact on the country than another clean water project or another Philam boy trying to do, trying to be a humanitarian?" And so I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And that really hit hard to my heart. And so when I don't know if you guys have met Rexy, he's the founder of Kayako, my co-founder. So he founded a nonprofit when he was at Brown, and his nonprofit was a 2-month fellowship that took Filipino students from like Harvard and Stanford, Georgetown, Brown, Berkeley, USC, University of London, University of Toronto, and take these students to the Philippines. And his program reminded me of the life-changing experience that I went through. And so when I told him about my conversation with Ambassador Quisha, he was like, oh my gosh, let's do this. And so we started traveling around the country. We went to Washington, D.C., New York, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, looking for other Filipino Americans who wanted to quit their jobs. And we all moved to the Philippines together. So it wasn't just me. It was this kind of like, we call ourselves like the Avengers. And we all moved to the Philippines. And then if you guys like this Avengers initiative, the Gokongways, the Lopezes, and the Ayalas were our infinity stones. But anyway, so yeah.
That's cool. So actually,
Yeah.
like that, I think that leads into our next question pretty nicely, which is, so you said you met Rexy, who became your co-founder, but
Yeah.
when you met and you had this vision board, like how did it all sort of come together with, coming up with the idea of Kumu and like deciding that was going to be what you guys were going to put together and really commit your time and energy to?
Yeah, that's a lot of, so that's one of the key things, right? And you can imagine any Filipino American entrepreneur who has a business idea. And so the number one thing too is, this is why we're so grateful for Dado. So Dado breaks things down in 5 specific formats, right? So it's like your operating plan. What's your technological advantage? Look at your team, then look at the timing of it, and then funding, right? So those are the 5 key things. And so during those mentorship sessions, he was guiding us along and talking about these kind of 5 key areas, really focusing on the technological advantage and the operating plan and the team, and then really timing it correctly. Because at the time, and even he was sharing it at the time too, was that, why the hell would you want to build something that's so big with bad internet infrastructure, right? The Philippines is really known for having bad internet, right? And so as we were kind of going through that, I think it became more real to him when he saw the commitment, because it wasn't just a business, like another person coming to Dado asking for funding. And that's the cool thing too. We never asked for funding. It was just advice. And for us, we actually won an auction. So, that shows our commitment. And number 2, we were willing to move to the Philippines. It's just not another Filipino American saying, oh, I want to help the Philippines, but then I'm going to stay in the US, right? We were all selling our cars, our houses, bring our savings and moving to the Philippines. And, it's a lot of research, right? This whole concept of product market fit. And so for us, it was, okay, there's something happening when you prioritize the voices of an entire country. So we saw WeChat build a significant business prioritizing the voices of China, and what Kakao did in Korea, and what Line did into Japan. But those are more developed markets. So we looked at emerging markets. We saw that Gojek built a $10 billion app ecosystem prioritizing the voices of Indonesians. And then we saw what Hong Min did, building a $2 billion app ecosystem prioritizing the voices of the Vietnamese. So we said, okay, if you could do that in Vietnam, why not the Philippines? So that was the initial thesis. And so with Dado's help, we had a first initial iteration, and then obviously a lot of failures after that to get to our current point. But yeah.
That's awesome. So I guess like leading up to that, tell us more about Kumu.
Yeah, absolutely. So one was he told us right up, like, you guys are going to have huge issues with the internet, so be prepared. And that was so key for us moving to the Philippines and preparing for the internet infrastructure, meeting with Globe, who ended up being one of our investors, PLDT, who one of our investors is one of the largest shareholders of, and then this new third one eventually, which would be Dito. And so, so the first iteration, right, February 2008, we're like, okay, cool, let's build a WeChat in the Philippines, and it ended up becoming a stupid idea. But we launched it anyway. So February 2018 was this thesis we believed in. Unfortunately, it looked like a shitty, oh wait, am I supposed to cuss? No.
That's fine.
Oh, okay. It was like a shitty version of Viber, right? Which is like, So one is like, okay, everyone's using Viber, but then who cares because it's a shitty version, right? And so, but the thing is, we take a data-driven approach to our cohorts, right? We never believed on the market, but we knew that if you leave enough room for your community, you let your community define the product. So even though the initial iteration was a messenger app that not that many people cared about, we started paying attention to the behaviors of these college students in Quezon City who were addicted to Kumu. And so, like, for example, Bourbon, right? Bourbon was this messenger check-in app founded in San Francisco. And everyone's like, I don't get it. There's already check-in apps and messenger apps, right? But they were looking at the behaviors, and then they noticed that the photo editing and photo sharing feature was so popular that the team decided to, and this is what you call a pivot into a photo sharing and photo editing app. And then they rebranded themselves as Instagram, and then boom, Instagram blew up, right? Those types of things. Or for example, if you look at Glitch was an amazing video gaming platform, but what they realized is they built a great messaging platform for their team that they pivoted into becoming Slack, and everyone knows Slack. So same thing for us. We left enough room for a community, and this little known feature in the background, live streaming, was being used so much. We're like, what the hell? This is crazy. So we looked at it, took a qualitative approach, picked up the phone and talked to our users. And we noticed that, oh, wow, okay, there's enough data saying that we will be a live streaming app. So that's when we pivoted in August 2018 as a live streaming app and moved away from the initial messenger. And when we pivoted to becoming a live streaming app, that's when millions of people started downloading the app. And the big takeaway that we got was our Gen Zs and millennials love the fact that it's 100% live, because you're no longer pretending that your life is perfect, like on Instagram, and you can't hide behind a keyboard and engage in toxic behaviors like you see on Twitter and Facebook. So there's something authentic about being real and forming communities around that. And so the big thing there is that's why it's so important to give enough room for your community to define your product, because if it wasn't for those college students in Quezon City, we wouldn't have figured out that, wow, launching a live streaming app in a bad internet country sounds like disaster for everybody. Yeah. But we were able to quickly realize that the billions of dollars that were actually spent by Globe and PLDT was, it's actually three things from a product market perspective. One, billions of dollars being spent on internet infrastructure. Two, all these cheap smartphones now that used to be $500 are now $100. And the fact that most of the Philippine ecosystem is Gen Z and millennial. So you have these three factors happening at the same time that everyone is pessimistic about the Philippines. And these college students made us realize, no, there's a huge opportunity that no one's recognizing, and we just went for it. We literally just went for it.
I'm sure that was that like scary at all? Like what, to just sort of pivot and make that jump. And like, I mean, I know that you said that you did your research, you did a lot of the like testing, making sure that there was really this user interest and but still to like make that change, like how did that work with you guys and fully jumping into that?
Absolutely. So one of the things I recommend, I mean, it's kind of an older book now, but at the time it was relevant. So Sean Ellis wrote a book called Hacking Growth. And he talks about before you actually spend any marketing dollars or anything to really focus on the rapid growth of a business, you got to make sure that you have a must-have product. And so what it is it's called a must-have survey. And on this must-have survey, at least 40% of the people in that study have to say you would be very disappointed if you did not have this in your life. So we would always constantly send the surveys as like, would you be very disappointed if Kumu the Messenger app was on your life? Yeah, I don't care. It's stupid. I have Messenger, right? So then the thing is, but as we were iterating and we started focusing on this cohort of people that were addicted to the live streaming app, and then we surveyed them, they're like, oh my God, I would be devastated if we didn't have Kumu in our life. And we're like, what? With these 200 people? So we were focusing on a product that 100 people loved, not that what 1,000 people liked. Right. And so by iterating around that, and it was through a qualitative study that one of our interns, who's currently a product manager at LinkedIn in Silicon Valley now, at the time, she's like, and this is what I love about our culture, even though my thesis was or the company thesis was, let's prioritize the voices of young Filipinos. But for me, it was like, oh, a messenger app, but it was an intern. This is what I love about data. When the intern said, no, I think it's a live stream app and I'm 21 and you're old, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And we literally pivoted based off of what the intern said. And so again, yes, you're right. There is fear, but at the same time, that's why data is so important, because it takes the debate out of it. And, we already moved. The scariest part was actually moving to the Philippines, right? So we're already here anyways. We might as well just go all in. And the funny thing is, you're going to love this story. So because the internet is so bad and we couldn't really find office space, we were at Asian Institute of Management and noticed that there was a building with Dato's name on it that we actually squatted there. They didn't even know who we were. We're like, oh yeah, we heard about this through one of our advisors. They go, okay, go ahead. Right? We're like, what? Okay. And then there was a password to the Wi-Fi, and it had 100 megabytes per second. It was like the fastest internet in the country. So we were like working on Kumu as squatters in this AIM thing that had Dato's name on it. It was it's the funniest story. But yeah, it was super cool. Well, I mean, we ended up becoming a part of the community, but I mean, the first initial, it was weird because no one was around. Like, I think it just opened. That's why. And no one was at the entrance. So we just walked in and then put our laptops on and we started working on Kumu. And someone's like, who are you guys?
We're a startup.
Yeah, we're a startup.
So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. I mean, it's happened really fast. I mean, you're talking 2018. It's only 2020 now. But you've already, closed a first huge round of funding. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
And now you're looking at a potential second round. Can you tell us what that experience was like, especially for a startup in the Philippines that doesn't, I think as an ecosystem ordinarily get a lot of investment, or it's really difficult to fundraise. So how did you guys sort of manage and navigate that, and what's the experience been like for you?
Absolutely. I think, one of the key things and what we noticed was HBS class of 2010 was always kind of like a huge thing for us. So Harvard Business School class of 2010, we're talking about Paolo founded Zalora, Anthony founded Grab, Jesse and those guys were all classmates, and his mom Doris owns Magsaysay Shipping, but he's also was the first seed investor in Grab Philippines, right? And then you also had Nadeem, who founded Gojek. Can you imagine Zalora, Gojek, Grab, all in the same class, right? And so we got a lot of advice from them and started recognizing that there is a kind of concept where you do need kind of some internationally educated folks working very closely with the top local folks and really providing perspective and getting a lot of advice to help navigate this world, because they say that Manila is so small. And so what we had to do was really leverage a lot of that. So when Liza was our first investor, she really helped us a lot, right? She introduced us to some folks, and it was because of Liza's participation that we were able to get ABS interested, right? So you saw that kind of FOMO happening. Mm-hmm. Now, at the same time, we had met Kurt, who is now part of HBS 2021, who we believe, because right now we're talking to all 3 Filipino HBS students right now. We're trying to get ahead of it, right? Just trying to make sure. So Kurt is in the current HBS class, and at the time he was working for Open Space Ventures, and he was an early believer in us. And so Open Space Ventures, why they're important to us is they were the lead investor, Series A investor in Gojek. And when they invested in Gojek, they were a call center that pivoted into becoming the $10 billion app prioritizing voice of Indonesia. And so when he started seeing the potential of us being a consumer internet champion for the Philippines, he really helped guide us along and just was watching our progress. And I think that's the important thing, is catching international investor interest early on and having these back channel conversations were super key to manage the expectations, because I won't tell you which particular investor, but one of those infinity stones was like, all right, if you want this much money, I want 80% of your company. I'm like, 80%? That's crazy. And the reason why they do that is because they have the leveraging power to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's just the way the Philippines operates. But when you have an international investor saying, no, we're going to invest millions of dollars at less than 20% of Kumu, that kind of said, okay, fine, we'll just follow these guys. And that is so key to really navigating, because it was the international investor that was able to kind of leverage. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's great to have the major families in the Philippines, but at the same time, you'll run the risk that they'll, and I'm not saying you guys are bad. I love you guys are the best. But what I'm saying is, because of the way it's been historically, to your point about the ecosystem, they tend to try to take like a majority. But because of digital transformation, and what was a landmark report was the Google Temasek report saying that the Philippine digital ecosystem is at a rapid pace, you're starting to see families realizing, you know what, let's act more as investors. So you saw, right, the Ayalas launched an investment fund, the Gokongways launched an investment fund. So now they're actually launching venture capital funds rather than just taking majority stakes. And so with the international investors, they're able to kind of check each other in a way, which was really, that turned out. And see, this again goes back to Dado, timing. Dado talks about timing, and that's why timing is so important. Timing from an investor perspective and timing from a market perspective, which was, I alluded to earlier, was the investment in telco, the young population, and the fact that these phones are so cheap. So, I mean, it was just a perfect storm. But despite that, launching a live streaming app to everyone else while we were working behind the scenes, I felt like freaking I was building a boat that no one got, and then COVID happened, you know? So, yeah.